geeks and geekettes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, cats and kittens, comic book fans the world over. Welcome to another thrill-packed, information-loaded, curiosity-sating episode of Ask Chuck Dixon, where you ask me questions about what I do for a living, and what I do for a living is I write comic books. Let's not waste another moment of your precious time. Ace Mowick is first up, and he asks, considering that Dark Horse is flaky about following up on comic pitches, Image doesn't have the best creator agreements, are any of the other independent publishers, IDW, Dynamite, Boom, etc., better for up-and-coming writers, artists that don't have a large enough audience to crowdfund? It strikes me that some would rather just do the more creative work at an independent publisher to build the audience than have to learn how to navigate the algorithm of YouTube and build an audience. The companies you mentioned aren't necessarily open, especially Dynamite or Boom. I don't think they're particularly open to creator-owned projects. IDW is in deep financial doo-doo, and I don't think they're open. And they haven't been open to new creative projects for a very long time. IDW developed kind of a clique of their favorite creators, and they kept leaning into them over and over and over again, even though their projects didn't necessarily sell real big. So, so there's really, I can't think of any place to go where, unless you already know the people there. Comics are very cliquish, and it's hard to get in. I mean, I largely got a lot of work at IDW because Ted Adams was running the place, and I knew Ted well from when he was an intern and like an associate editor or associate of marketing. I don't know quite what Ted's position was at Eclipse, but everybody recognized him as an up-and-comer and a smart guy and a personable guy. And when he created IDW, he was very open to work for me because, we had a good working relationship going all the way back to Eclipse, and he liked my stuff. I was part of that clique. But the thing is, it started at Eclipse, and Eclipse was a very different kind of a company in that they really only cared about if they could sell your stuff, or if your idea was kind of outrageous and worth taking a look at. They weren't prejudiced toward new creators. But Dean was very much into Eclipse being a vital money-earning publishing outlet. And so he was always looking for new ideas to sort of break through. And I was very welcome there, given lots and lots of work, both on established properties that they assigned me to, as well as open to some of my crazier creator-owned ideas. And but they would also readily hire anybody that could move the needle. I mean, they were working with Alan Moore, they worked with Marv Wolfman, they worked with guys they knew could sell, and they were big early promoters of Rocketeer and properties like that. And pretty much they took on all comers, but there's no company like that now. Mostly it's just about the money, which is short-sighted. You can't just be about the money in a creative business. You got to take a risk every now and then. Every now and then you got to reach out and go, okay, I got a feeling about this. I got a good feeling about this. It's not, by conventional wisdom, this isn't a comic anybody's looking for or anything else, but this could be the next big thing. And that's how next big things happen, by somebody taking a chance. And none of the publishers you named would ever take a chance on a risky property. They're all looking at conservation of risk. Comic book companies have unfortunately become more like Hollywood in that they're afraid to take a chance. And if you look back across the history of comics, it's all about taking chances and then capitalizing on the ones that work and abandoning quickly the ones that didn't. Redundant publishing. I've said over and over again. You're looking at fads, you're looking at trends, but you know when to get out of it. You know when to pick up on a trend, you know when to get out of it. And that talent seems to be lost. They just seem to get on a trend, superheroes, and just stick with it forever. Now, the only truly creative open area that I can see that you can present them to, that the people aren't prejudiced toward new creators, or they haven't developed any kind of a clique that I can discern, is Ripascend. Ripascend is part of Ripaverse, and it's a creator-owned wing. It's very much like Eclipse Comics, creator-owned efforts. It's very much like early Epic, as run by Archie Goodwin. They'll look at everything. They're looking at pitches all the time, and they'll certainly sell your property. Ripascend is, if nothing else, they are champions at marketing comic material. I'm doing a project through them myself right now. I'm very, very pleased with the contract. I kind of helped them along on what a creator-owned contract should look like, and they took it to heart and actually, to my mind, improved on the creator-owned contract model. So that's the only place I can really think of that's still where it's the wild and woolly west. Your only other alternative is to crowdfund, and of course that's complete creative freedom, but then again, all of the weight is on your shoulders, as you said. Yeah, and seriously, if you're going to work in comics or any other creative field, you can't avoid it. Eventually, you're going to have to learn how to market yourself. You're going to have to learn how to sell yourself. So those YouTube algorithms and all the rest of it, you're going to have to learn about them. You're going to have to learn about climbing up the Google search ladder, and how to work with Amazon, and how to work with all these other people. I mean, yeah, it's unfortunate. I don't like it either. I just want to sit here and make stuff up. I don't want to be a businessman. I don't want to deal with mathematics. God forbid I have to do math. But unfortunately, that's the sad reality of this world, as I will lay out to you in this week's Drive Time in much, much greater detail. Okay, Tim Adams, what do you think is the best way to show sarcasm in a comic? Well, there's various ways. You're right, you can't get tone of voice across on a word balloon, but there's ways to do it. Facial expressions would be one. A nice eye roll or smirk can put across that the character is not really meaning what they say, which is what sarcasm is. Sarcasm is kind of irony. I'm praising you, but I'm not really praising you, because I'm praising you to such a ridiculous degree that if you weren't so self-involved, you would realize I'm actually insulting you. That's sarcasm, and that's one brand of sarcasm. But sarcasm is generally meant to wound or to wake somebody up to reality, or just to be funny on its own. But how do you express it in comics? Nobody does it better than Scott Adams. Dilbert is built on a foundation of sarcasm. So many of the characters make sarcastic remarks, say things they don't mean, and then the joke is always the sarcasm itself, and or the clueless individual the sarcasm is aimed at just simply not getting it. And Scott Adams really does this well. And what he relies on to get the tone of sarcasm across is that he gets you to know his characters. So you'll know if, like, the boss never really makes sarcastic remarks. So everything he says is literal. But Dilbert and almost all the other characters, the core characters, will use sarcasm. And because you've gotten to know them and know their attitude and everything else, you realize what they're saying is not what they actually mean, because you know their characters. So that's one way, is to get it across in comic form, is that you know your characters. Now, Spider-Man, extremely sarcastic character, but his face is covered, so obviously you can't use the facial expressions. But what you can use is context. And also, we know the character. We know that Peter Parker is a bit of a wise ass when he's in the Spider-Man costume. He takes on a different persona, which always fascinated me when I was a kid, because it was so deftly done by Ditko and Lee that this guy alters his personality as soon as he puts that mask on. And I never saw that more clearly delineated or handled with such nuance as I did in that first run of Spider-Man. And so you see what I mean. You have facial expression, context, and knowing who the character is, so that we understand what they're saying and where they're coming from. Yvonne Magila, you often talk about the Jack Kirby principle as a big example. Is it the biggest example? You use Silver Surfer. So what is Chuck Dixon's biggest shot on Jack Kirby principle? What idea that came as a stupid idea, but you simply couldn't let it go until it turned into something? The Jack Kirby principle, for those of you who don't understand, it's something I coined. Kirby would just come up with the craziest ideas imaginable and somehow make them work by sheer force of will and enthusiasm and presentation. And I often point to the Silver Surfer. Silver Surfer, I thought, was a ridiculous character when I first saw him on the newsstand at the drugstore. But when I read the first story with him in it, by the end of it, he was my favorite Marvel character. I just thought he was just awesome. And I started out thinking this is a dumb idea and went for it. Just went for it in a big way. Now Kirby, I don't think Kirby thought these were dumb ideas. I just think these are the kind of crazy ideas he came up with. I mean, he came up with the Mother Box, for goodness sake. I've gone into depth about the Mother Box and what an amazing fictional creation it was, because we all have them now. And it looks so impossible in the day that you could have a device, about the size of a paperback book, thin paperback book, that would contain all the information in the world and allow you to communicate with others. And you could actually talk to and it would respond on its own, with its own seeming sentient intelligence. That idea seemed ridiculous in the early 70s, like impossible. And yet here we are today. But Kirby, I don't think Kirby thought these ideas were dumb. He just put everything into them. He Kirbyized them. And he needed comics are a medium that just chews up ideas, and he was willing to throw almost anything into the hopper, and he did it with skill and determination, and just made it work, and made us love this stuff as much as he did when he first visualized it in his head. Now, I come up with crazy ideas all the time, but they don't seem that crazy to me. They don't seem stupid to me, but people have remarked on them like, that was nuts. Like, I enjoyed it, but it was crazy. Where'd you get that idea? That's crazy. And I point to one which was kind of drew a lot of attention at the time when I was writing Green Arrow. Connor Hawke was famously raised in a monastery, famously a virgin, and as I wrote him, famously really, really uncomfortable around women. He just didn't know how to deal with women because he never had to. And so I had his first sexual encounter with a Chinese ghost, which was I got excoriated for years over that, but I thought it was a cool idea. And I've been watching a lot of Hong Kong action stuff dealing with ghosts, and I thought, hey, why not? Let's get crazy. That's all, no problem with it. Similarly, recently I was talking to someone and they were saying what an insane idea Something Big was, to combine an alien invasion story with a heist story. And he says, the guy said, how do you wake up in the morning with those kind of ideas in your head? I was like, but it didn't seem that crazy to me. It didn't, I knew it was kind of different. I'd never seen that before, but I couldn't see any reason not to do it. I couldn't see okay, well, that's just stupid. That's not going to work. And if you're a writer, if you're a creator of any kind, you always come up with an idea that sometimes you abandon because you just realize in the middle it's too ridiculous. Unfortunately, in comics, we don't have the luxury to throw ideas away. I think that's how this stuff happens. And I just kind of kept thinking about Something Big over and over and over again for years. And it all came together when I talked to Frank Fosco and said, hey, Frank, you want to draw this thing with me, this crazy idea I have? And he said yes, and then I had to seriously start thinking about it, populating it with characters, thinking about the plot advancement, thinking about the beginning, the middle, the end, all that jazz. So yeah, that's the Kirby principle, but like Jack, I don't think my ideas are that crazy. It's up to others to think that they're crazy. Twin spin! Lucky Yvonne gets a twin spin, and he's back with, you often say that the crossover can or could move the needle on comic sales besides being a cool thing, and besides you being a crossover guy. Considering the overwhelming success of manga, someone should be thinking on it. On the other hand, due to such style difference between both, that it seems hard to fit this kind of crossover. So you're talking about like a American superhero comic crossover with manga. And as I said before, in any crossover situation, you're dealing with two separate companies generally, two separate property holders. And the first question both of them are going to ask is, what's in it for us? And there's always a little bit more in it for one guy than there is for the other. And in this instance, there's nothing in it for the manga publishers. Nothing in it except fun. You know, maybe one of their creators would go, yeah, I'd like to have my characters meet, the Avengers. Why not? That might be fun. But I don't think that's likely to happen because manga creators, it's a different animal. The way comics are created over there, they're very much creator driven. It's a much more competitive field. These creators are not going to generally take time away from their own creations. And very rarely, in fact, I can't think of an instance, are these characters done by other talents. I mean, Kodansha or Viz or somebody like that is not going to take, Berserk away from the original creators and say, well, we're going to have your characters show up in this other thing by other creators. That's typical of American comics, but it's not typical of Japanese comics, where the characters and situations and series are shared amongst whatever creators available. It always goes back to the core creator and his studio. So that would make things difficult. So I don't think it would really happen. And manga sales are so huge and American comic sales are so poor that the American side of it would benefit. I don't see how the manga side would really benefit at all from the crossover, because if their readers wanted to see the Justice League, there are Justice League comics they could read. That said, there has been Batman in manga form ever since the 60s. And obviously, if you're going to do a manga American comic crossover, it's going to have to be a manga style, because manga is a style. The manga characters would not look right drawn in the American style. It wouldn't be manga anymore. So it's not just Japanese creations combined with American creations. It's the dominant style would be manga. And since so many American creators draw in a kind of manga style anyway, it wouldn't be that much of a leap for them to do so. But I really can't imagine that happening, because, like I said, there's really nothing in it for the Japanese publishers, and certainly not for the creators. Be interesting though. Triple spin. Okay, Yvonne is back with, so do you have any want to see crossovers? Well, I have crossovers I'd want to write. I don't want to see them by anybody else. And basically, it's Aliens meets anybody, and Predator meets anybody. I've written both. I really dig both of these franchises, and they're so malleable for crossovers. That's why there's been so many crossovers with these characters. And I would love to do, Alien meets Conan, Predator, Star Trek. You name it. I proposed the Predator Sergeant Rock years ago, and I would love to have worked on that. Other holdovers would be other crossovers that I pitched over time. I pitched a Batman Dirty Harry crossover, which, went as far as Clint Eastwood's desk. Warner's was all for it. They loved the idea, and to me, it just wrote itself. But Clint didn't want his likeness appearing in a comic book. He's apparently softened on that image about his likeness, because now there's action figures, or not action, well, those really, really high-priced action figures of him and statues and things like that. So he's loosened up a little bit on that, but I would have loved to have written Batman meeting Dirty Harry. It just seems like a natural, doesn't it? Another one I pitched, which almost got there, was Dick Tracy Batman, drawn in the Chester Gould Dick Sprang style, because early Batman comics heavily influenced, the look was heavily influenced by Dick Tracy, among other things, the villains and things like that. Batman owes a lot to Dick Tracy. It just seems like it'd be a natural to have these two characters meet, in the 1930s or 1940s in the styles they were drawn in then. And when I pitched it, King Features loved the idea. DC wasn't as warm to it, and I really wanted to see it because I wanted Joe Staton to draw it. And this was before Joe Staton became the regular artist on Dick Tracy, because I'd seen Joe really beautifully mimic the Dick Sprang style in the past, and I wanted to see that. I just wanted to see it. I don't know that I ever had a story. I just pitched the idea of, Dick Tracy needs to meet Batman. I mean, how cool would that be? And mixing up the villains. Mumbles meeting the Joker. I mean, it would have been beautiful. Kieran Brunkard, how do you plan a story before you start writing? Well, every writer works differently. Some writers start with a theme. Some writers start with a character. I generally start with the big scene, the high concept, the where is the story going, what's the big, huge, climactic, Frodo and Gollum wrestling at the lip of Mount Doom for the ring. I want to get to that scene. How do I do that? I got to create all these characters and situations and everything else to get there. And basically that's where I start, and then I try to figure out everything that would make that big scene or those 2 or 3 big scenes tie together. I'm working on something now where it's an entire novel that works toward this big scene that you never saw coming, this big strange thing that happens, and I've got to populate that with characters, set up what motivates them toward this big scene, what events happen along the way, and things like that. I watched a thing recently. It's a YouTube channel called Movie Wise, and I don't always agree with the guy, but I like listening to him because he puts ideas in my head. And one of the things he was talking about was a book whose name I can't remember, and it was a book that said that movies aren't made up of scenes, they're not made up of acts, they're made up of segments. And it really opened my eyes, and mostly it articulated thoughts I already had, but I hadn't really put them into words in my head. I was like subconsciously thinking this way, that particularly, I mentioned Frodo and Gollum, particularly when you're writing a quest story or a story where there's an objective at the end, characters have to move from one place to another or whatever. How do you make that interesting? And I've always said you have to never mention the quest, or don't mention the quest too much. Never have the characters directly refer to plot. And of course, those two things are important in a story like that, like Lord of the Rings, like Lawrence of Arabia, like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Characters working toward a goal, possibly on a timeline, in danger, whatever. You don't want to constantly be reminding the viewer, the reader, that all of this is going somewhere. You want to keep them engaged in what's going on in the moment. And so this segment theory of filmmaking arrives. And think about it. If you think of Lord of the Rings, if you think of Lawrence of Arabia, if you think of Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, if you think of like Guns of Navarone or something like that, you can remember scenes that happen throughout it. And those scenes are the segments that string the thing together. It's like a series of little stories, little vignettes that distract you from the idea that you're watching a story, distract you from the actual plot line, but at the same time carry the story forward. And that's kind of the way I write. When I'm after I've gotten that initial idea and I begin building the story, I begin thinking of the segments. Where you think about the Magnificent Seven. The Magnificent Seven builds the characters through segments. We're introduced to all of the seven in scenes of their own. Seven Samurai, same thing. I mean, obviously, Seven Samurai, Magnificent Seven, same story. And there's these segments where we're introduced to the cast, and they're each given time for the reader or viewer to see what they're about, who they are, what kind of person they are, and everything else. But in a story, in like this little story, this little encapsulated, origin or introduction for that character. And those are the building blocks to me. I mean, that's the way I write. Not everybody writes that way. Some people outline something to death and then, strictly follow that outline. They have the whole story figured out ahead of time. I just don't do it that way. I have the basic building blocks in my head and I just begin writing. And sometimes in doing it, I surprise myself. I'm like, oh, whoa, this could happen. I didn't think of that before, but now that I've written all this other stuff, I've sort of allowed space for this really cool thing to happen that I didn't see happening. And if it surprises me, I have to assume it's going to surprise the reader. So that's kind of how it's done. And in my reading about other writers, I've learned that Raymond Chandler worked the same way, but he didn't put the work in on the plots. Great writer. Not taking anything away from him. Couldn't plot to save his life, but he knew how to come up with the big scenes. The big reveals, the memorable sections of dialogue. There's all these. If you read Chandler, you can remember all these great scenes or segments. You can't remember the plot line to save your life. And largely, Chandler was great at hiding story because he wrote these whodunit mysteries in which you really didn't give a damn whodunit. You really didn't care. You weren't compelled forward by the mystery. You were compelled forward by these interesting little things that kept happening and twists and turns in the story. What was going to happen to Phil Marlowe next? How many times was he going to get knocked out? How many times was he going to be drugged and locked in a room? How many times were the cops going to drag him in and give him the third degree? How many times was he going to be threatened by gangsters or seduced by the femme fatale? And that's really what drove you through the story. He wrote like anti-mysteries, mysteries that in some cases didn't have any real conclusion. I think Chandler, he was supposed to be a raging alcoholic. I think he just willy-nilly just wrote, and he's just so damn talented that even through an alcoholic haze, his use of language and compelling dialogue and all the rest was still came through. I don't drink, so I'm not getting any help there or hindrance, whatever it did to Chandler. You got to wonder, was he a better writer boozed up, or would he just not have been? Would he not have been able to be a writer at all? Writers are a strange bunch, and I'll include myself. I'm not excluded. I used the wrong part of my brain. Alex Sheikman, I'm going to guess it's Sheikman. Once in a while, you mention original comic art. Do you have a collection of art? Do you only collect art from your comics? Do you have individual pages, or do you also have covers in your collection? Is there an artist or a series you would like to have a page from but don't have one yet? Yeah, I have original art. I'm just, these pictures are things I can literally look from my desk right now and see. This is a Russ Heath page from a Star Spangled War comic from the 50s. It's 2 up, it's real large. And I got it because I like the Western theme. I love that shot of him working the Winchester down there. This is was a pitch piece by Kiki Akitana. Ended up being the cover of Detective Annual number 7, and it's the Pirate Batman. And Kiki did 4 pieces, of which I own all of them. He very graciously gifted them to me. This is a spec piece by Rodolfo DiMaggio. He really wanted to storyboard an Indiana Jones movie, and he did a bunch of Indiana Jones spec pieces. And he sent me this one because I love my Rodolfo DiMaggio artwork. Guy's amazing. This is another gift. Ernie Colon was late on his deadlines on Airboy, trying to make up for it. Sent me this absolutely gorgeous Airboy cover done in inks and Dr. Martin dyes, and it's huge. It's like a 2-up, 3-up cover. And that I can turn my head right now and see it on my wall. This is a cover very generously given to me by Graham Nolan. I told him it was my second favorite Batman cover of all time, and he gifted it to me. What a guy. This is a cover gifted to me by Rodolfo DiMaggio, again, inked by Bill Sienkiewicz. It was a GCPD cover, and I just love it. It's so hard-boiled crime, noirish. Just the action in it is terrific. That's Renee Montoya, and she was nobody's sweetheart. She was not going to be held hostage. You can see her; she's handcuffed to that bed, but she's not letting those guys anywhere near her. This is a cover that I bought it from John Dell when we were at CrossGen. It's a Michael Golden cover, and I really wanted it, and not just because it's Michael Golden, but that's a good enough reason. But it features two characters I created. Lynn Michaels, the female Punisher, and Payback, the Punisher wannabe. Now, as far as the question of, do I own other original art? I own, I own a lot of original art. Over the years, I've either been gifted or bought a lot of original art. A lot of Russ Heath. I own complete stories of Sergeant Rock. I own an almost complete story, my favorite Warren horror story by Russ, Dime Novel Hero. I own all but one page. I have flat files. My wife, early on in our marriage, suggested that I buy some flat files, and she found some on an incredible sale. So I have flat files filled with artwork, and they actually serve a purpose because a lot of this artwork is the original artwork to things I created. Invasion 55, Time Jump War. I have almost all of the Law Dog art. Flynn Henry said that he wished for me to keep it, so it would be kept safe. So there's the Vanishers. I mean, any number of things. I own all of the original artwork because I should. Recently, for years I held on to all the original artwork from the Racer X run and Alias run at Now Comics, but I recently sent it all to Todd Fox because I felt bad hanging on to it for all those years. I kept trying to, I eventually made things happen with Alias. I tried to make some kind of a deal for the Racer X stuff. I was never able to do that, so I just sent it back to Todd, and because it's his artwork, and to make some space in the house. Got a lot of stuff. So yeah, I got a lot of originals. Is there something I'd love to have a page from? Yeah, I'd love to have a Jack Kirby Fantastic Four page. I can't afford it. I'd love to have a Russ Manning piece. I don't have one Russ Manning piece in my entire collection, and I would love to have one. But the stuff's pricey. It's getting pricier. Somebody told me that a lot of this original artwork is bought by wealthy trial lawyers who are comic fans. And let me tell you, comic original art is a hell of an investment if you can get it at the right price. So I've many times been able to pay the tax man or max out, pay off maxed out credit cards by selling original art. So that I bought years before. So yeah, I got a bunch of original art. Twin spin! Alex Sheikman is back with, you said you realized that you are a Francophile and you talk about your interest in French history. Have you ever encountered a comic book adaptation of Three Musketeers that you really enjoyed? Have you ever considered adapting Three Musketeers into comics? No, I never have. And you referenced that I recently discovered I'm a Francophile. I didn't really realize I was a Francophile until I started working with my friend Jean-Francois Cavier on some film projects. And I realized in talking to him that I knew as much about French pop culture as he did. And I realized how many French movies I'd seen and how much of my comic book collection is French comics. And even some music I listen to is like French pop music, not French rock and roll music. It's not worth anything. French rock and roll music is horrible, but you know, some of their pop music I like. So, so I realized I was a Francophile. Um, Now, as far as Three Musketeers, I've never read a comic. I've seen comics, but I've never seen one that I really thought was that great. As far as versions, I know you didn't ask me about this, but it's my show. As far as film versions, I really love the Richard Lester ones, Three and Four Musketeers. I think they were, in keeping with Dumas, but also delivering an English sense of humor to the Frenchy goings on. Another one I really like is D'Artagnan's daughter. It's Sophie Marceau as obviously D'Artagnan's daughter, and it was a vehicle for Sophie Marceau, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's also a hell of a good swashbuckler movie and a hell of a good Three Musketeers movie, and has an amazing sword fight on the rooftop of a chateau at the end, at the climax. It's up there with the final sword fight in the Vikings for me, as far as like a vertigo-inducing sword fight. So I really dug that one, and I like the recent BBC TV series of the Three Musketeers. I watched all of them, and I dug them. I thought they were cool. But would I adapt Three Musketeers now? I think my adapting days are past me. I'm so busy on my own creator-owned stuff. I mean, certainly be interesting. It'd be an excuse to, reread Three Musketeers and really delve into it. I could probably be lured into it with the right artist. Obviously, I was going to work with some amazing art talent. I would go, okay, yeah, all right, I'll adapt it. And as long as I was given enough real estate, as long as I was given enough pages to do it justice, so we didn't have to cut and trim and, chop all the good stuff out. So there you go. Triple spin. Look at you. Look at you. Alex Sheikman is back with his wished for triple spin, but he earned it. He didn't just wish for it, he earned it. He says, I laughed when you joked that Dumas would have been a good comic book writer. I never thought of it that way, but you're right. Writing his novels as periodical installments, he was very good at ending every chapter at a cliffhanger. What other writers who never got a chance to shine in a monthly comic book do you think might have made a good comic book scribe? I didn't think about this before when I was putting this together, but I think Charles Dickens would have been, because again, he wrote in a serialized form as well. He would have been a good comic book writer. He knew his way around story. Now, Joe Abercrombie writes fantasy novels, and not only did he write fantasy novels that are so easily adapted to comics, because I adapted, I partially adapted one, I never dealt with Joe directly. I dealt with like a third party, and I told this third party after I'd written two issues of one of the books whose name I can't remember right now. I said, boy, his stuff lends itself so well to comics. I really don't have to work that hard. It's already almost a comic script. And I think that Joe took that to heart and realized, hey, I can do this myself. And he finished the graphic novel. So I wrote like 2 issues, and then he wrote the rest, the next 3 or 4 issues, or however many it was. And God bless him, because he learned how to write comics. It's not that hard if you're a writer and willing to apply yourself and don't look down your nose at the medium, and can figure out the visuals. But yeah, I mean, he was good. He was good. Another guy is John Bentine. He wrote a lot of Westerns. His real name was Ben Haas. He wrote Westerns under a whole bunch of different pseudonyms. But his stuff, as far as setting up character, setting up action, very much paced like a comic book, in that, there's not too many pages go by before there's a punch up, a chase, a shootout, whatever. So his books are so visual that I think that he would have easily adapted. Boy, if they had teamed him with like John Severin in the 70s, that would have been comic book gold. I would have been in heaven if that had been a collaboration. I'm actually getting a little sick thinking about it now that it didn't happen. John Bentine and John Severin would have been awesome. Mickey Spillane is another one. But then Mickey Spillane did write some comics. He claimed that he wrote some Submariner comics back in the 40s. Stan Lee kept saying he didn't, but why would Mickey lie about it? And also, he said he wrote a lot of those little text pieces that appeared in comics. If you're a Silver Age collector or Golden Age collector, you always see these 2-page text stories that appear inside of a comic. And maybe you've wondered, hey, I'm off on a tangent, but it's my show. Maybe you've wondered why those text pieces appeared there. These really, generally awful, wretched, cliched stories would pop up in the middle of your comic book. And the reason was, for whatever reason, the post office would not mail comic books as second-class mail to subscribers unless there was a minimum of 2 text pages inside the book. So comic book publishers were forced to hire writers or make editors work overtime to fill those 2 pages with text, with whatever crappy story they could possibly imagine that would fill out the word count for 2 pages. Now, eventually, of course, they moved to letters columns to fill those pages of text out. That's the reason, because the comic book publishers couldn't make any money if they had to send the comics first class. There you go, a little bit of history for you. Hey, I got a postcard offer. I got 5 postcards. Yeah, I know, there's only 4 here. There's a 5th one, it's a surprise. I got 5 postcards, and how do you get them? Hey, Chuck, how do you get them? Oh, by the way, they're signed. They're all signed by me. You get them by joining Subscribestar, Chuck Dixon. You go to subscribestar.com. I'll have the link down at the bottom here. And you join as a $5 member, and you get these 5 postcards sent to you in the mail. And in addition to that, every month you'll get digital goodies. I send out scripts, unpublished stuff, master files with artwork and script of things that never saw the light of day. And and then other things, like recently I sent out my illustrated bibliography. It lists everything I've ever written with pictures and everything else as a PDF file, so you can look back on my career and find out what you missed. But I have sent other physical media out. Subscribers got the first issue of My Sister Suprema. They've gotten other postcards sent to them in the past. I even did a miniature wargaming figure of myself, and 5-star subscribers got one of them. So if you want one of those rarities, one of those tchotchkes, head on over to the link I will provide below. So that's it. Now if you want to contact me, brunobookstore@gmail.com, brunobookstore@gmail.com, and as I described in an earlier video, no, there is no actual Bruno bookstore. It's all in my head. It's all virtual. So that's it for this week. Thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for watching. Thanks for sharing. And thanks for all the incredible questions. They really were fantastic. And I'll see you all down the road.